We are now learning more about the man arrested and charged in Utah County.
Hello, my name is David Hamblin. I am a priest in the Lakota Native American Church, even though I'm a white man. Mitakuyasin.
Also his ties to Utah County Attorney David Leavitt, who will not be allowed to prosecute the case.
He was my neighbor. I had a family connection.
Utah County Attorney David Leavitt is continuing to face criticism tonight from the public and legal community. He's accused of dismissing criminal charges against his friend and campaign donor.
Is it true that he donated to your campaign?
It is. It is.
Is it true that the defendant served a mission with your brother?
He did.
Leavitt explaining how he tried to broker a deal with a tribe in Montana, offering them the ability to export buffalo meat to Ukraine as part of a request he made at the same time to adopt the child.
So if we can form a bilateral agreement between the people of the Northern Cheyenne and the people of Ukraine to introduce buffalo to Western Ukraine. The first reason why I'm here is this. We want to adopt one of your people.
Noel Engels is a former analyst with Homeland Security.
This is not how you adopt a child. This is how you procure a child.
He confirmed his team had been investigating sexual allegations against Leavitt for several years.
If a man wants to program some little girl to give immoral sex anytime he wants to, you start young and give rewards. I mean, it's unfortunately, I've never, it's the same way you help a child learn how to make their bed.
Today, I want to talk about the David Leavitt rabbit hole. It's so much worse than I thought. There's like all these twists and turns and connections. And if there ever was a video to wear a tinfoil hat, I mean, at one point it was like, I felt like that crazy meme with like, and this one in 2002, but then this one, his neighbor and his friend, they went to the same thing together. So I'm just going to give you the facts and you decide for yourself what you think. So the last video that I did about Night.
I can't breathe. I can't walk. People say that's an act. Let me try to stand up. Let me try to stand up. Exactly. Exactly.
Or Nick Alaverdian or Nick Rossi or whatever his name is. The prosecutor in the charges that he had in Utah is David Leavitt. And when I was doing that video, I stumbled upon all these crazy things and allegations about the prosecutor in the case. And I talked about it for a little bit. And I was like, this is like, it's a whole different video on its own. And so that's what this is. Let me just start in the beginning? Question mark. That was how I'm doing. Beginning? Question mark. The whole thing started on May 2022 when the Utah County Sheriff's Office issued a press release. The ensuing investigation discovered that other victims had previously reported similar forms of ritualistic SA and trafficking that occurred in Utah County. During the time between 1990 and 2010, portions of these allegations were confirmed. These allegations are being investigated by the Utah County Sheriff's Office in cooperation with other local and federal agencies. We are pleading with the public and encourage victims or individuals with knowledge of these crimes to contact the Utah County Sheriff's Office Special Victims Unit so that they can be offered all the assistance possible. We understand that there are individuals who have concerns for their safety and or well-being, who have been silenced. We need your help. Contact Utah County Sheriff's Office at 801-851-4010. So first, when this came out, people were like, what do you mean ritualistic? Like, what is this, satanic panic?
A ritualistic probably typically more would involve a group of people, an organized effort, providing victims to each other. I got this person here, you can take them, kind of a thing.
They also said that when they say ritualistic, they mean there's like a religious element to it. The crazy thing is not this, although it is. But what happened was the next day, David Leavitt comes out with this press conference out of nowhere where he's like, I'm not a cannibal, I'm not a murderer. And everyone's like, nobody said you are. What are you talking about?
Now, the Utah County Sheriff's Office never named Leavitt as a subject of their investigation, but Leavitt this morning called the media to his office to hold a press conference to say that he believed this investigation was improper.
He announced he is not a murderer. a cannibal, or an abuser.
My wife and I were part of those allegations, alleging that we were guilty of cannibalizing young children and murdering young children.
He knew the details of who the victim was or who the suspect was, which we'll find out later. It's David Lee Hamblin.
Men and women allege David Hamblin used positions of power to ritualistically abuse children.
He put his hands on my head and he gave me a priesthood blessing, asking his sperm to heal the cellular damage in my body.
He was arrested Wednesday morning, but investigators say he probably won't be the only one. Fox 13 News chose not to identify any of the subjects of the investigation, but that did not stop Utah County Attorney David Leavitt from outing himself as a suspect and describing his relationship with Hamblin.
This therapist was my elders quorum president in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He posted deer to use for ritualistic purposes. He was my neighbor. I had a family connection.
In 2012, David Lee Hamblin and David Leavitt were both accused in a crazy 150-page allegations that I read, that I have a high threshold for graphic essay type shit. And I had to take breaks and there was I almost threw up in my mouth several times from what I read. It's insane, these allegations. Well, David Leavitt and David Lee Hamblin were named, as well as 15 other people, for being in the Church of Satan, pretending to be LDS, but they're Church of Satan, and they do the most messed up shit to kids sexually. Then they kill them, they sacrifice them, rituals, crazy shit, right? So he was named in that in 2012. Now that case was dismissed in 2014, and I'll get into that. But that's not what the sheriff was talking about when he came out in 2022. But for some reason, David Leavitt thought that they were bringing those charges back up again. And he thought that they were doing this, or at least that's what he said, because he was up for re-election and they wanted to take him down. It was politically motivated.
Why is it occurring 7 days before the ballots drop in my election? Those charges were dismissed by my predecessor because the allegations were so untenable and unbelievable.
So he comes out and he's like, these charges were debunked, and the sheriff should resign for misuse of funds for this investigation. He went off.
You want the sheriff to step aside as well as Sergeant Cannon. Do you think you need to step aside while this investigation plays out?
Absolutely not. The sheriff's office is using its position for political gain.
That same day, the sheriff, he does an impromptu press conference as well.
Leavitt is using his authority and his pulpit to bully, distract, and mischaracterize the facts of an ongoing investigation.
We won't be intimidated by Mr. Leavitt.
This is not a politically motivated investigation.
Do you think he should resign? He wants you to resign.
I'm not going to play that game with him, and I'm not going to stoop to kindergarten games with him.
David Leavitt, when he was talking about the victim in the charges that he was accused of, in 2012, he was like, this person is tragically mentally ill.
These are victims of crime who have mustered the courage to come forward, and this is what we call them, is mentally ill, are victims of crime. How dare you?
He said tragically mentally ill woman 5 times to attack their mental health status as a way to discredit them. And it was clear that that's what he was doing. And that's just not okay.
He said Leavitt's actions today may have now compromised their case.
Well, it turns out Nick Alaverdian, Authonite, the case that I talked about before, this little sneaky devil, while all this is going on, if you remember that video, he is being discovered, for not being Arthur Knight, for being Nick Alaverdian, who faked his death and is on the run in Scotland for insane R-word charges over the years.
In 2020, Alaverdian was charged out of Utah. That same year, a woman claiming to be his wife called several news outlets claiming Alaverdian had died of cancer. Authorities say that was a lie.
We're just beginning to know some of the details about this man.
And he's got this website, and he's the one who brought up these charges from 2012 and put them online and was rehashing them. So David Leavitt, who was the prosecutor in Nick Alaverdian's case, was being targeted by Nick Alaverdian. There's election like very soon after this whole debacle of the press conferences. And the sheriff is supporting the guy who's running against David Leavitt. All right, keep that in mind. So David Leavitt's like, okay, you're supporting the guy who's running against me. And now all of a sudden, right before the election, you're talking about these charges. And he brought stuff onto himself that nobody really knew about. It was like he shot himself in the foot in a major way. The thing that David Leavitt said during that press conference was that they were so outlandish, these charges, they were debunked, and that like the case was dismissed because it was just like insane and ludicrous.
They dismissed it because the evidence was so outlandish.
The thing is, that's not why the charges were dismissed. Turns out there's like audio recording.
There's a lot more that needs to be done with this case. And it's just not coming together. I'm getting assistance from DCFS, and then there's other medical records that we're having some trouble gathering. A lot of it's due to just the age of this case. It's an extremely delayed disclosure.
Cases have passed away, records have been shredded just because of the nature of the length of the time that's gone on.
It was hard to find evidence. There was like shredded documents, like certain like child services or whatever was like not cooperating. Now you can decide for yourself, what was the reason? Was it nefarious? But that's why. And it was dismissed without prejudice, which means that they could come back and charge later on. So if it wasn't that they were ludicrous and that's why they were dismissed. It's also important to mention that the prosecutor who dismissed these charges in 2014 was not David Leavitt. Although David Leavitt was not the one who dismissed those charges against Hamblin, he did dismiss other charges against someone who was accused of stalking a woman, and that victim sued him for dismissing those charges because there was a conflict of interest in the sense that this person donated to his campaign and went on a mission with his brother.
Utah County Attorney David Leavitt is continuing to face criticism tonight from the public and legal community. He's accused of dismissing criminal charges against his friend and campaign donor.
Is it true that he donated to your campaign?
It is. It is.
Is it true that the defendant served a mission with your brother?
He did.
And his brother personally had David Leavitt take this case of this guy they knew.
The defendant prepared a fairly large binder of information, gave it to my brother, his former missionary companion. My brother forwarded it on to me.
That's the most suspicious thing, the degree to which people were coming up to him and said, "Hey, David, dismiss this case."
Leavitt says the suspect reaching out did play a role in him taking on the case personally.
It certainly was one of the reasons.
He says another reason is the original prosecutor refused to drop charges against the suspect.
I said, Lance, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, I'll take the case. I'll do it.
The victim says she now wants the criminal case to be tried outside of Utah County, but Leavitt has refused.
Well, it's my case. It's not his case. It's my case.
And then there's this recording that the victim recorded with David Leavitt where he's basically telling her that he wants to dismiss these charges against her stalker so that he would stop and that he would do his own form of justice.
I'm going to take matters into my own hands in Utah County, and I'm going to start dispensing my own form of justice. One way to solve this problem might be for me to call his lawyer and say, I'm going to give you an opportunity here to have your guy get off on this.
This recording was in 2014, by the way. Then, a few years later, in 2017, there was this other thing that happened, which is this adoption. So David Leavitt and his wife, Shalom Leavitt, which, by the way, she was also named in those allegations in 2012 as being a part of all this. Okay, this is wild, okay? They adopted a Native American girl. I touched on it briefly in my previous video where it was like they offered buffalo for the Ukraine to this tribe. to adopt one of their people.
The video shows Leavitt explaining how he tried to broker a deal with a tribe in Montana, offering them the ability to export buffalo meat to Ukraine as part of a request he made at the same time to adopt the child.
You rolling or not?
I think he's done.
You can wait.
Your call.
You can wait.
I can wait for what?
No, Aaron can wait. You go ahead. I love this story. I want to hear this.
Anyway, so I go in and the president of the tribe is in there and I'm thinking, okay, what do you say here?
Is it a man or a woman?
It's a man.
Okay.
2 of our 7 children were adopted and 5 were biological, and we had vowed that we would never adopt a Native American. There's such a prejudice in the Native community about a non-Native adopting a Native. Right. I say to him, I said, I'm here for 2 reasons. I said, but before I tell you the second reason, I want to tell you a story. I said, there was, in World War II.
Then it highlights his close friendship with former Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko.
Victor and I have this goal of introducing buffalo into Western Ukraine. I'm here to try and see if we can form a bilateral agreement between the people of the Northern Cheyenne and the people of Ukraine to introduce buffalo to Western Ukraine. The first reason why I'm here is this. We want to adopt one of your people.
The child's biological mother willingly gave up her parental rights, but the biological father did not.
I had secured a car seat through some fairly weird means an hour earlier. Native Americans, and look at this white guy trying to take this Native baby. Finally, I just thought, forget this. I put the baby in the car seat, not buckled. Car seat wasn't buckled. I just thought, you know what, just drove out.
Basically, what happened is this. David Leavitt's wife, Shalom, there was some sort of like program with the Mormon church where they would sort of foster Native Americans. There was a woman, Mary, who was Native American, and she grew up and was fostered by David Leavitt's wife's family. So she kind of grew up almost like Shalom Leavitt was her sister in a way, foster sister. But then she ended up leaving. She started having problems with like alcoholism. And then her daughter had the same issue with alcoholism, and she got pregnant and was arrested, and that child was put in foster care. So the foster sister kind of David Leavitt's wife's granddaughter, are you with me? Her foster sister's granddaughter is the baby they ended up adopting. Then there was this podcast that was made, and then they contacted the Native American family of the child who was adopted and found out like the whole backstory. And there's like secret recordings of David Leavitt talking to the family and them having disagreements about the adoption.
The family confronts David.
That's what I want to know. Why? Why should I let my niece be raised by you?
Soon after he got back to Utah with the baby, David stopped by Mary's house.
Tona calls the shots here.
Tona can't call the shots from being in the jailhouse.
This is a recording of that visit that was shared with us. David tells Mary and Darwin that he is going to raise Tona's youngest child. In fact, he'd like to take all 3 of her girls, but then Darwin jumps in.
You cannot just take them from us. It's what you are doing. That's how we see it, David.
I understand how you feel. I'm sure that it's a frustrating thing.
Let me ask you one thing. Who are you to come into my house and say what you're saying?
I'm 54 years old and have 7 children of my own. I'm involved now, and I'm involved because you asked me to be involved.
No, I did not ask you. I did not ask you. You guys put yourselves involved.
Okay, right. You allowed me to be involved.
It's been years since you even saw any of our family or communicated with us.
You want to take me on this, buddy? Be happy to do it.
I'm just telling you how it's been years.
Right. I care about those children. Those children.
You didn't know they existed.
So what?
So now you care? Now you do? Because why? Why should I let my niece be raised by you?
Because I'm a good father. I respect the Northern Cheyenne ways. I'm not here to raise a white person. In fact, I dare say that by the time those girls are raised, they'll understand their heritage a hell of a lot better than you do.
That's really, really low.
And I'm telling you, we don't have to be enemies, but if we're going to be enemies, you go ahead and take me on.
During this documentary about the adoption, there are clips that relate to the David Hamblin case and the allegations with David Hamblin, sorry, and the ritualistic SA allegations. And it's crazy. So David Leavitt says in this documentary that he's heard of this type of abuse, that he knows someone, he's talking about David Hamblin, and how like he was like killing animals and deer for ritualistic purposes and like eating like their organs and doing all these rituals, and that there was a girl there and that he couldn't really prosecute it. It's weird.
There is no organized ring of abuse. It was debunked more than 10 years ago.
But watch and listen. More than 2 years before that press conference, he went on to describe Hamblin and his own accuser. We want to warn you, some of them are very graphic.
Do I think that occurs? Yeah, I think it occurs. I know some victims of it. I was not in a position to prosecute it. It was into Native American stuff. He'd kill deer and get deer hearts and drink their blood and drink the deer's blood. How do you train a dog to roll over when it's time to roll over? You know, you do it by giving a reward and repetition. If a man wants to program some little girl to give immoral sex anytime he wants to, you start young and give rewards. I mean, it's unfortunately, I've never, it's the same way you help a child learn how to make their bed.
It's weird because he had connections with David Hamblin.
Describing his relationship with Hamblin.
I prosecuted the therapist for poaching a deer. He poached a deer to use for ritualistic purposes. This therapist was my elders quorum president in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was my neighbor. I had a family connection.
I read someone trying to describe what the elder quorum thing means, and from what I gathered, this would be like they would get together maybe once or twice a month to discuss certain things. And so they would see each other maybe at the very least that often, plus they were neighbors. The person who accused David Leavitt of being part of this was in that neighborhood, and they all like knew each other. As a result, though, of this documentary and these allegations and the filmmaker contacting police, there was a Homeland Security investigation into David Leavitt that was going on. They were investigating him for bribery, they were investigating him for human trafficking and SA allegations. And they were given this footage of this documentary where he's talking about this. And something weird happened there too.
Noel Engels is a former analyst with Homeland Security. He confirmed his team had been investigating sexual allegations against Leavitt for several years. Then, in 2020, Homeland Security received the video and started investigating for human trafficking. 5 months after receiving the video, documents show Noel and his team were removed from the case. He has since filed a whistleblower complaint.
I want to read you what like they responded, the who he filed against, like that took him off the case. They said that you allege that HSI Homeland Security Investigation improperly terminated an investigation into allegations involving current Utah County Attorney David O. Leavitt. We emphasize, and this is the attorney for HSI, we emphasize that while the Office of Special Counsel has found a substantial likelihood of wrongdoing, based on the information you submitted in support of your allegations, our referral to the Secretary for Investigation is not a final determination that the allegations are substantiated. This remains an open matter under investigation until the agency's final report is forwarded to the President and Congress. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. It seems like nothing, but that's just kind of odd. The other thing we need to talk about here is why the sheriff is against the county attorney, because usually they get along, you know what I mean? Well, they have beef, and there's like a whole drama there, which I have to tell you about. He got rid of the Special Victims Unit in his office. So the Special Victims Unit are prosecutors that are only looking at and specialize in cases of SA and domestic violence and crimes of that nature. And he got rid of the Special Victims Unit entirely. He said like it wasn't good, and so he got rid of it. So it says here, Leavitt's 2020 decision to disband the unit and divide such cases among all office attorneys has been a constant source of criticism from police groups and former county prosecutors. Adam Pomeroy is a Utah County prosecutor who was on the Special Victims Unit when it was disbanded. He says Leavitt told him the unit was being dissolved because some of the prosecutors on the team were resistant to Leavitt's policy changes. We believe that Mr. Leavitt has so thoroughly damaged the system, he just has to be replaced, Pomeroy told the Salt Lake Tribune, no matter who replaces him. When David Leavitt was up for re-election, the sheriff supported another guy. His name is Gary, who was going against David Leavitt. And one of the things he ran on was saying that if I'm elected instead of David Leavitt, I'm going to reinstate the Special Victims Unit. Let's talk about David Hamblin now, okay? Because this guy is objectively a piece of shit. Objectively. Unlike David Leavitt, David Lee Hamblin actually admitted to doing these things that he's accused of. Not everything, but he did admit to SAing his own daughter. He admitted to having inappropriate relationships with his patients because he was a therapist. He actually graduated from the Arizona State University, and he has a doctorate from there. He's a psychologist, and he would get referrals from the Mormon Church, LDS Church, for people who needed therapy or whatever, and he used that position of power to sexually abuse his patients, okay? Allegedly. The thing is, in 1999, David Hamblin lost his therapy license because of sexual misconduct with his patients. David Hamblin now changes his identity. Instead of being David Hamblin, the therapist for the Mormon Church, he's now Black Jaguar, a medicine man for a Native American church.
I am a priest in the Lakota Native American Church, even though I'm a white man. Mitakuyasu. Hey, 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 Diomana, Diomana. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, yana.
And he specializes in peyote. The same year that he loses his license, he actually gets arrested for possession of peyote. And also, he gets charged with poaching because he killed these animals, like a deer and protected animals that he wasn't supposed to kill for ritualistic purposes for his religion, where he's also ritualistically using peyote. Peyote is protected for use in religious purposes, like for Native Americans, but he's not Native American, but he is part of a Native American church. So he pled not guilty, and he was like, I should be protected to use this because of why I'm using it. It's like for these Native American religious ceremonies. And so when he gets arrested, it was actually his daughter who also accused him of SA. His daughter is the one who basically told the police that her father has peyote. He gets arrested, but he immediately gets bailed out by all these powerful people in the church that have money and stuff like that. He's got a lot of connections. They say he had fancy cars from people that he, sold peyote to. And so he got out. He fought the charges. The charges actually got dismissed after a couple years, basically, of them fighting. They were able to get the charges dismissed because they were found to have the right to use peyote for religious purposes, even though they weren't ethnically Native American. The other thing that happened is that a year after these 1999 charges where he lost his license for sexual misconduct, his daughter then accuses him of SAing her, officially in a report. So I'll put the allegations here. You can see that it basically says a lot, including SAing his daughters since they were 3 to 4 years old. that he is a psychologist and he uses hypnosis for therapy. She said that she believes that he uses hypnosis to prevent them from remembering things that happened before, and that they're seeing another therapist and they're working with this therapist and they're able to remember things that happened to them. And that is why they're coming forward to report this. And they said that she gives really graphic things about what happened, that he like comes into the room, she's pretending to be asleep, and that he basically hits her and threatens to kill her or do the same thing to her sister if she makes noise. And then he like violates her in a very graphic way, putting things in her and it's just, you can read it here. It's actually, I actually cannot read this out loud. Like I can't do it. It's so bad. And like this isn't even the worst stuff that I read. Like it's insane. You can pause if you want. It's a few pages here. What ended up happening is that a few years later, it says here, this case was referred to the county attorney's office. In 2001, I spoke with Deputy Attorney John Allen, and because of the inconsistency of the victim's statements, he decided not to prosecute. On January 8, 2003, I received a letter from John Allen stating that he had reviewed the case because of a civil hearing in the matter. John Allen stated that the case would still not be prosecuted. The reasons are listed in the letter. The thing is, what happened in 2003, this civil thing, is that there was a divorce between David Hamblin and his wife, the girls who accused his mom. And apparently, during these divorce proceedings, David Hamblin admitted to R-wording his daughter. He said he did it, but then he was like, someone in my body did it, like as if he was possessed by something. Like he did it, but not really. Manipulative shit. But still, they didn't prosecute it, okay, at the time. So that happened in 2003. Around this time also, there are things that I found like where the mom, Rose or Roselle, she calls the cops on her daughters for like running away, stealing the car, trying to leave. This daughter who's accusing the father of doing this and later on gonna accuse the mom too. The mom got arrested at 17. It's like for the same shit. It's awful. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So now you have David Leavitt's backstory, the prosecutor. You have David Hamblin's backstory, the therapist turned medicine man, Black Jaguar. And we know that they're connected. They're both accused of these horrible things. So now that I've given you their backstories, we're back where we started, which was in 2022 when David Leavitt comes out and does the press conference. Well, what happens is that a few months later in September, David Hamblin is arrested.
Arrested in Utah County on suspicion of ritualistic child sex abuse and his ties to Utah County Attorney David Leavitt, who will not be allowed to prosecute this case.
There are a number of reasons why the Utah County Attorney's Office might have a conflict of interest. Not just because Leavitt named himself as a suspect earlier this year. He's also given multiple statements about his relationship with David Hamblin and some of the alleged victims.
They released the probable cause statement, which is also unbelievably horrific, right? I mean, it's not as bad as the 2012 accusations, but it's still pretty damn goddamn awful. So I will again repeat myself by leaving the screenshots up for you to read, but I'm not going to read it. It's just too, I can't say the things in my mouth. So you can pause it, you can read it if you would like. It's gross. When this was released, it was also released that, quote, neither Leavitt nor his office will be allowed to prosecute the case against Hamblin. A spokesperson for Leavitt stated she had no information as to why. Also, by the way, remember that election that I told you was coming up? David Leavitt lost the election. A month later, they were like, we have new charges from a case in the 90s where the boy was like 4 or 5 years old. And they were like 6 instances where he was horrifically abused, allegedly, by David Hamblin. So those charges come out. Then another guy comes out. This guy's name is Brett Bluth, and he talks about his experience with David Hamblin, it's awful what he says.
Brett Bluth, who says he met this therapist through a referral program from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Bluth was referred to this therapist to discuss his homosexuality.
Hypnosis was a big part of it. He told me that from the very beginning, that was his main technique. I was there as a very vulnerable young man, very desperate to be free of my sexuality. He removed his clothes and, he would say, "I'll show you that I'm not. You're afraid I'm a woman." He had diagnosed me with multiple personality disorder due to systemic ritual sexual abuse as a child. That was a lie. That convincing me that those horrible things had happened was how he actually molded me to do what he wanted. Unzipped his pants, took his out and put his hands on the back of the sofa and sat there in silence. And I froze. I didn't move. And after a few minutes, he brought my head down to his crotch. I performed oral sex on him. I stopped. I did not want to do it. I sat up and he sat in silence with me again with his zipper down. He put his hands on my head and he gave me a priesthood blessing, asking his sperm to heal the cellular damage in my body, to undo what those men had done. And I got up and I walked out and I never came back.
And he says that he actually went to Provo police in Utah to tell them about his experience in 2013 when those 2012 charges came out, and that they, quote, looked at him like he was crazy, as if things couldn't get any worse. In August of 2023, a little less than a year after David Hamblin was arrested, his ex-wife, Roselle Stevenson Hamblin, that's her maiden name, Stevenson. She was known as Rose Hamblin too. She gets arrested.
70-year-old Roselle Stevenson stands accused of abusing a 13-year-old girl in Spring City, this back in 1994.
For also horrific things that she did with David and they did together, and what they made their daughters do to them. I mean, and the neighbors' kids, and awful, awful. Again, if you want a screenshot, you can read it, but I'm not going to read it out loud. Okay, so I can't. Rose is the daughter of apparently a renowned LDS scholar, Richard Lloyd Anderson, and the granddaughter of Garrett D. Jong, namesake of LDS apostle Garrett Jong? So apparently she has like this prominent family in the LDS community. Same thing with Hamblin. Apparently he comes from a prominent family. It gets even worse. There's all these problems trying to get a prosecutor to prosecute it, to the point where these cases might get dismissed, not because there's something wrong with the evidence or whatever, but apparently there's a conflict of interest with the prosecutors because of like David Leavitt's office and the people there. Like the judge feels like they shouldn't be prosecuting. In spring of 2024, David Hamblin's attorney filed a motion to dismiss his charges for failure to prosecute. And it says Judge Griffin has said he will grant this dismissal if there's no prosecutor assigned to the case within 30 days' time. So it says there's an audio recording where a sheriff's investigator can be heard telling Stevenson that the office was hoping to withhold certain evidence in Hamblin's case, including the 151-page statement. Remember, Stevenson is Rose, David Hamblin's ex-wife. This is what the sheriff's investigator said. It is exculpatory. They have a right to look at it. They have a right to verify it. The investigator says in the recording, according to court records. We were just hoping we could get at least through a preliminary hearing before that happened. The judge agreed that there's a conflict of interest in the case with the prosecutors. This is what the judge said. He said, I've got concerns that investigators were slow walking exculpatory evidence to the defense in an effort to get a tactical advantage. He said, according to a recording of the hearing, and I think that in and of itself screams for the need to have outside county attorney's office that is not beholden, or that there isn't any political tie-ins to either the current or the prior administrations, both with the county attorney and the sheriff's department. It says to avoid a conflict of interest, they deputized a attorney as a special Utah Attorney General prosecutor so that he could file the charges. He's the one who filed against Hamblin and his ex-wife Rose. But then he was off the case because the governor made him a juvenile court judge. So now there's nobody who can handle the case. Prosecutors wrote in a November filing that Peters reached out to 4 other prosecuting agencies asking them to step in, but only the Utah County's attorney's office said it would take the case. So they're trying to get the other counties' attorneys to prosecute the case, but they wouldn't take it. And the reason why is because it is a tremendous amount of resources to prosecute this case that they don't have in their jurisdiction. None of the other jurisdictions will prosecute the case, and the judge won't let the Utah county attorney prosecute the case because he says there's a conflict of interest, so there's no one to prosecute the case. And if there's no one to prosecute the case in 30 days, then like by default it gets dismissed, and it's like, what the fuck is going on? So people heard about this and they started calling, like being like, this is insane, like you need to appoint someone, and apparently they have appointed someone. The case is moving forward, the last I heard. I don't know what's gonna come of it. The whole thing is bizarre. Like I would love to know what you guys think. Like the whole David Leavitt thing, I'm not sure how far his involvement goes and that part of it. I feel much more like David Hamlin for sure. I mean, he even admitted it allegedly, according to these court documents, that he did admit to doing these things. So that I even found about the mom, Rose, that like when she was confronted, she says that if she did do these things, she was under the influence of like hypnosis or peyote or something. So she didn't full outright deny it. She's like, I don't remember doing that to you guys, but if I did, it wasn't me. I was influenced. So that's kind of gross and weird. So like what the hell was going on in that house? All this talk of hypnosis and him telling them that they were victims of ritualistic child abuse, like that's what Brett Bluth said he did to him, which was a lie to get him to like reenact it to cure him of it. So I feel like that's kind of part of Hamblin's manipulation, so that even if someone were to accuse him later on, he'd be like, no, this was all suggested in hypnosis. And what do they really know? And it's to muddy the waters, maybe. I don't know. It's bizarre. This whole thing is gross. I mean, honestly, it was like I hated researching this. I miss who I was before I made this video. But it sucks because if this is true, as awful as it is for me to read it and talk about it, it happened allegedly to someone potentially. If it did, they deserve justice, and for this to be talked about, you can't just ignore it because it's uncomfortable for you. It needs to be dealt with if it happened. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know, man. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching. Bye.